My face is already moisturized with a gel cream, but I'm adding this Aveeno baby lotion on top. I started using this a couple years ago, mostly during the summertime when I wanted my face to be moisturized but not oily. It gives my skin a blurred look and a smooth surface, which is perfect to put makeup on top of. This lotion doesn't mix well with others, so make sure your previous moisturizer has set before you put this on top. I usually fill my brows after foundation, but today I'm starting with brows because I'm following celebrity makeup artist techniques. Recently, I've seen Beyonce's Sir John, Kim K's Mario, and many others start with brows, but some of them said they don't always start with brows, it just depends on the situation. For me, I like to start with a light pencil to map out the shape because it's easier to remove if I make a mistake. It also adds dimension because it creates a shadow-like fill beneath my darker hair strokes. But be careful though, because it can get muddy if you overdo it or if the shade is not light enough. Draw light strokes from the root to the tip in a flicking motion to mimic tapered hairs instead of harsh lines. And remember to check your shape as you go. To clean up, I'm putting Fenty 430 on the back of my hand so I can press my brush in it and make it flat. I like to use a flat, straight edge brush soaked in concealer. Before I drag the concealer down, I wipe off the excess from the brush to get a smoother blend without getting concealer all over my lid, just in case I want to use eyeshadow primer later. I noticed that a lot of makeup artists tend to blend between applications, so I'm using a mini damp sponge to blend under my brow. Normally I don't do this, but today I'm taking my time and being precise so I can get the best base ever. Speaking of precision, the bristles of this Ulta flat concealer brush tapers to a small point, which is perfect for getting super close to the edge and blending out that harsh line directly under the eyebrow. I don't always clean up the top of my brow because I like to see the hairs instead of a straight line. I like more of a natural, slightly untamed look, but again, makeup artist techniques. I'm using Fenty 440 to clean up the top because it's a little darker and more red, so it matches my naturally bronzed forehead better than 430. Something else I learned from celebrity makeup artists is to take your time, especially while you're learning. When you rush through every step without any thought behind the technique, you start to build bad makeup habits. Obviously, when you get more practice and experience through building good makeup habits, you can go faster without constantly messing up because you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, slow down, girl. Brows, man, they don't ever match. Don't like that. I feel like when I'm trying, they don't turn out right. And then when I'm not trying, they be perfect. Every time. Trying to brush away some of the harshness that's at the very start of my brow, so that they don't look like mean brows. And then the top, I don't normally like it to be boxy at the top, so I try to also blend that part out. Good enough for now. And then, it's good enough for now. Next, concealer. So I see them use the concealer. They put the concealer on the back of their hand, and then they put it on with a brush. Most of the time they conceal first and then put foundation on, probably so that they don't have to do a full face of foundation. And they use brushes. So I have two different types of concealer brushes here. One is the Fenty one. It's kind of angled and more fluffy. And then this concealer brush is from Ulta. It's just called flat concealer. It's a flat concealer brush. So I think the Fenty one is for a more natural look. And then this one is for more like packing on the concealer. And I'm going to start with NARS. And I'm going to try to carefully I forgot that I wanted to put primer under my eyes. I didn't want to put primer on my whole face because I don't want to be super dry, but I definitely wanted to put it under my eyes. It's fine. We'll just go without it today. So, using the flat concealer brush, I'm carefully brushing and packing on the NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer in the shade Amande. I think the point of doing concealer before foundation is so that you won't have so many layers underneath your eyes. If you're going to cover up the foundation anyway, why put it there at all? I think that's the point. Usually I just use the applicator directly on my face, but this time I put it on the back of my hand and used the brush. My guess is that makeup artists do this to keep their concealer sanitary between clients and also to warm up the concealer for a smoother application. I'm feathering out the edges of the concealer and being careful not to wipe off the areas where I want the most coverage, aka right below my eyes. So when I'm applying it under my eye, I'm doing a light patting motion, and when I get to the edges, I swipe and brush to feather it out. Again, making sure to blend in between applications with a sponge. Next, I'm going to pack on, then brush out Fenty 420 concealer on top of the NARS that I just applied with the Fenty concealer brush. I just wanted to see if there's a noticeable difference between the two brushes and if I prefer one over the other. Then I'm using the remaining product on the brush to brighten my nose and T-zone. This brush holds a lot of product, so I didn't have to add more to it. This is such a good multi-use kind of brush. My first impression of it wasn't the best, but the more I use it, the more I find different uses for it. It just has a unique shape and it allows you to pack on, blend in, and feather out makeup on multiple parts of your face. Kind of want to go in with a little bit more brightness on the inner parts of the eye next to the nose, only because I've seen them do that. I don't feel like I need it, but I'm gonna do it anyways. So for that, I'm gonna use Fenty Concealer shade 410. I'm slowly and carefully applying this bright concealer shade to the sides of my nose, starting just below the inner corners of my eyes. I'm lightly patting it on just like before. This bright shade will give me a slight reverse nose contour just to define the shape of my nose a bit more. So today I normally use a pointed foundation brush, concealer brush, or the Fenty foundation brush. So I normally use one of these three tools to apply my foundation, and rarely, I used to use this more like during the summer when I wanted to wear less, but today I'm going to use it to apply my foundation since I'm trying to go light with it. So I already mixed it on my hand and I'm just dipping it in. For foundation, I'm using Fenty Beauty and I mixed about a half pump of 420 with a full pump of 430. I'm using a stippling stamping motion to apply a thin layer at first. This will give me the most natural look and also cover any blemishes. I'm making sure to get the corners of my mouth because I usually forget that area. And after each application, I'm following it up with a damp Fenty sponge for a more secure blend. I don't know why I can't speak today. I kept building for more coverage in between blends. This technique gave me such a smooth, skin-like base. For the forehead, I am going to use the Fenty brush because I can get in that area better without going over my brows. Actually, I'm going to try to use this Sephora VIB Rogue brush. It's a mini flawless airbrush. I still see a couple of blemishes peeking through, so I'm going to try to conceal it. I'm gonna try to let that dry down a little bit before I buff that out. I probably should have just added more foundation because the Fenty concealer takes so long to dry and I have zero patience.
A few moments later.
When I'm doing spot concealer, I let it sit for a moment. Then I lightly tap it in and brush out the edges. I'm actually glad I kept the little Fenty sponge duo. It works for areas that I don't want to like over blend. Before I set my under eye, I'm using a brush to gently smooth out any creasing. It's better to use a fluffy brush like this one or a sponge instead of your oily fingers so you don't wipe off your makeup. After I knock off the excess powder, I use a medium-sized fluffy teardrop brush to lightly press and roll the loose powder underneath my eyes. I have my head tilted down while I'm looking up into the mirror. Looking up smooths out the area where your natural creasing normally is. So I'm just setting all of my highlight areas with Fenty's cashew powder. Now I'm using a Laura Mercier puff to press the powder down and smooth it out even more. Again, I'm doing the press and roll motion and I didn't add any powder to it. This step is equivalent to using a clean, damp beauty blender to smooth out your liquid or cream makeup. I'm using the Fenty matchsticks in espresso to kind of sculpt and bring back some warmth to my face. I put it on the back of my hand so I can get an even amount onto the brush before stamping it on. Some celebrity makeup artists say this technique is better and faster than drawing lines on your face, which can be slower and harder to blend out. Makes sense to me. I'm blending upwards and adding more as I go. Kind of wiping my brow off, but I'll fix it later. Now I'm using a clean buffing brush to blend out any edges and marry everything together in light circular motions. It's hard to do brows first. You just mess them up the whole way through while you're doing everything else. Like, look at that. They look so terrible now. Ugh. Take a very little bit of this espresso and take it down the sides. I'm just taking this powder brush and getting what's left over from the brightening powder, the cashew, and I'm just kind of tapping it down both sides to blend out the contour to make it less harsh. I'm gonna use this big Wet n Wild brush, dip it in the powder. Okay, the base is done. The eyebrows don't look great, but let's move on. To prime or not to prime the lids? I decided to use Fenty's eyeshadow primer. I put it on the back of my hand and used a big fluffy brush to spread it evenly across my lids and slightly above my crease. It's important to make sure that the primer or concealer on your lids is a smooth layer so your shadows won't be clumpy. After I applied it, I let it sit for a moment so it can set itself and be ready for eyeshadow. I'm doing a grayish blue smoky eye with a warm crease, and I'm starting with the Fenty Beauty Moroccan Spice palette. Even though this palette is not very pigmented, I really love the ashy blue gray color and some of the other mattes as transition shades. I'm warming up my crease with this warm mauve shade called Spice Trip. So I'm building up the shades as much as I can before moving on, using patting, sweeping, and circular motions to apply and blend the shadows. This BH Cosmetics Zodiac palette has a blue-gray shade in it too, but it's a little more gray and a lot more pigmented. Actually, now that I'm looking at it again, it looks more purpley gray. Either way, that's what I'm using. Now I'm going in with the ColourPop Shayla palette. I really love this palette, so good, so pigmented. And I'm packing on the dark blue shade to create a halo and add some depth to the eye. Actually, I don't know if this is supposed to be black or blue, but either way, I like it. I'm taking my time to blend and diffuse. With this metal gray shimmer, I tried to do a spotlight shape on the lid, but this gray ended up not being bright enough next to the other colors. I wanted to add more silver sparkle, so I dipped my brush into the Fenty Diamond Bomb highlighter. I love this highlighter, so versatile. Then I proceeded to use this highlighter for the rest of my face. I decided to add some smoke to the bottom lash line with that blue-gray from Moroccan Spice. I kept trying to build that smoky blue shade, but it wasn't going on as dark as I wanted it to. Now that I'm editing this, I remember why. It's because the Fenty shadows aren't very pigmented unless you use their primer to give it a small boost, and I didn't prime the lower lash line because I never have before, and I don't know, it just seems like an extra step and I don't want to have to do that extra work. So I grabbed my Shayla palette. First I'm going in with this gunmetal shade for my inner lower lash line, and I'm using a lip liner brush because the bristles are smooth and firm and that gives me more precision. And I'm just pressing that shade into place. Another thing I learned is don't just go in with large fluffy brushes for everything like you see on YouTube, especially if your eyelids are small or hooded. Pay attention to your eye space and find the brushes that fit well in that area and in your crease. If you want precision or you're trying to create a specific shape, use smaller brushes. Then you can blend it out afterwards with a medium or large brush if needed. To deepen the outer lower lash line, I use the same dark blue shade from the Shayla palette. Next for the eyes, I went in with a black eye pencil from Urban Decay and I just smudged it out with a pencil brush. Then to further define the lash line, I used a lip liner brush to pack on that same dark blue shade and smoked it out with a short shader brush. So here I am again, trying that spotlight shape. This time with a brighter silver though. But I forgot that some eye crayons don't budge once they're placed. They set in seconds. So you gotta really try to blend it out. So the final thing that really made it pop was the silver shade from the Zodiac palette and then more Diamond Bomb on top. Sir John talks a lot about using duality to make your makeup last. For example, setting your cream contour with a powder contour. In this case, I'm setting my cream bronzer with a powder bronzer. For the lips, I'm using 2 gel lip liners from Sephora, making sure to blend in between applications. These gel lip liners are really good because they stay put. Now I'm applying the Fenty Lip Luminizer on top in the color Single. This blue gloss on top of pinks, so pretty. I like to curl my lashes before applying mascara because it's cuter. False lashes can be intimidating to put on, but I learned that applying mascara first makes it a little easier. Then I apply mascara afterwards to blend and thicken them. I couldn't get my lashes to stay on because I didn't apply enough glue to the ends of the lash, but it's okay. Lastly, I'm going to complete my look with some Kilowatt Foil Highlighter in Minted Mojito, the blue shade. So I didn't see any major tips about applying highlighter from celebrity makeup artists aside from don't use too much, but to me that's a personal and situational preference. Sometimes I do feel like I apply too much in the eyebrow arch, so I just blend it out with a fluffy brush or with my fingers. I'm applying a little more cashew powder with this Real Techniques brush that I found at Marshall's when I was out of town. It's called a foundation brush, but it's not a foundation brush. I was gonna throw it away, but it's so pretty that I decided to try it as a loose powder brush instead. And I'm glad I did because it fits perfectly under the eyes and on the sides of my nose. And I'm done. My main reason for creating this video was to learn how to make up a great base with foundation, concealer, and setting powder. And I feel like I definitely achieved that. My base is very smooth, but still skin-like, not cakey or dry at all. The way I set my makeup kept it looking good for several hours. Whenever my face got a little oily or sweaty, it dried right back down to how it looked when I first finished. So I guess that also says something about the Fenty setting powder. Set it and forget it for real. I'm happy with how this turned out and I cannot wait to create more looks. P.S. If you subscribe to my channel to see drawing, lettering, and art videos, don't worry, I'm planning to make more art videos soon. I didn't stop making art. I just decided to make my channel be about all of my interests and connecting with people who share the same interests. And I don't want to box myself into thinking that I'm only supposed to share one type of art form or subject, so I won't. Hopefully, this will encourage people to do what makes them happy and not what they think other people think they should be doing. Just be yourself and do what you want, period. With that said, thank you for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two. I know I did. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more content from me. Later.